Hello everyone, Shinto Bean here playing some Starcraft 2. We're watching a replay of a ranked match I played recently. I am the Zerg player, my opponent is Terran, but I asked ChatGPT what a typical Zerg vs Terran match looks like in Starcraft 2. So I'm just going to read the response and compare it to the game here and see how well ChatGPT can describe a match of Starcraft. So the AI starts off by talking about the early game, saying that players begin by sending their initial workers to gather resources from nearby mineral patches and to build structures. The first goal is to establish a solid economy. So far so good. The Zerg player will typically build a spawning pool early on, allowing the production of Zerglings, the basic combat unit. Additionally, the player expands their base by creating additional hatcheries and sending drones to mine resources from new locations. So actually I'm no expert on build orders. I always start off by building a hatchery first, and then immediately followed by a spawning pool. I'm sure I made a lot of mistakes throughout this match though. The Terran player decided to build a early command center right at his natural and is now producing combat units from 2 barracks and a factory. If you haven't played the game recently, you might be surprised at some of the changes. Like they have done quite a few balance changes and even reworked certain units, giving them entirely new abilities. Like for Terran units, I think pretty much every single unit has an activated ability now. Zerg, on the other hand, don't have so much of that, but it does require a whole lot of micromanagement. But in this match, the Terran player did a better job of scouting and chose a more aggressive strategy in the early game. I did build a roach warren, and I started making a bunch of roaches, not to attack, because 90% of the time when I tried to be aggressive in the early game, it ends up failing, so I was just using the roaches for defense here. Now, moving on, ChatGPT starts talking about scouting and reacting. Scouting is crucial in StarCraft 2, and the Zerg player will send overlords and Zerglings to gather information about the opponent's base. In this case, I did send a drone and a Zergling earlier. Overlords I don't really like sending against Terran because I usually forget about them and then they just get shot down by Marines. Zerg player aims to identify the Terran player's strategy and adjust their own accordingly. For example, if the Terran player is teching, upgrading their technology quickly, the Zerg player may opt for aggressive early game tactics or prepare for a potential attack. Now, I failed to see this attack coming. As you can see, I did have an Overlord a little bit outside my base, so, but yeah. Also, so they just sniped my spawning pool. That was actually pretty huge. And I got all the roaches in. I do have enough combat units to defend against this, but they were way out of position, and my opponent was just able to do some pretty good damage there, slow down my harvesting. I did get my drones out of there. That's something that I kind of struggled with in the past. And they do have liberators, though, on the other side, so he's hitting both sides like simultaneously, and this was really difficult to deal with because those liberators just deal a ton of damage, like 75 damage per shot. They can only hit units in the target area, but you can see that the bottom liberator there was just it took out some drones, it's killing larvae. Got the Marines running around, and I have very little anti-air to deal with this attack. The roaches, of course, can't hit air. So I had like one single Mutalisk there taking down that Liberator. He tried to defend against it with the Marines, but I did manage to clean those up. Roaches can spawn into Ravagers, so I got one Ravager there. It can launch like a sort of mortar shot that can hit air units very slowly, so I just used that to take out the final Liberator. But lots of damage done there with that initial drop and Liberator attack. Moving on, the AI talks about the mid-game, unit composition, and strategy. As the match progresses, the Zerg player focuses on expanding their territory, increasing their resource income, and evolving their unit composition. They will often create a spire, allowing them to produce Mutalisks, which are fast and highly mobile air units. Zerg players may also create roaches, which are sturdy ground units capable of dealing and absorbing damage. Banelings, explosive units effective against groups of enemy units, can also be produced. The Zerg player adapts their unit composition and strategy based on the information gathered through scouting. Normally I would do a lot more scouting using like overseers and stuff, but in this match the Terran was just so aggressive, just constantly hitting me with attacks that I didn't really have much time for that. I just had my hands full trying to stay alive. And he continued with the drops here. As you can see, more medevacs moving across the field. And of course I do have a spire at this point. I do like Mutalisks. They're just really good at harassing And they're not very good against Marines, though. So yeah, Marines can very easily clean up Mulisks. You don't want them going up in a fight there. I do have a bunch of Ravagers here, though. And it scared off those Marines. They didn't do too much damage. But he is flying around. And yeah, so I do have 2 more expansions. But I don't know if the Terran player knew about this. I think it was actually by accident. They sent his medevacs up here, and he just discovered my base. Sometimes I put like expansions way out in the middle of nowhere in the hope that they will just be able to remain unnoticed by my opponent, but here he flew right by, but then turned around and dropped those Marines to, and I had no defense there, so that expansion goes down. Moving on, the AI talks about harassment and map control. Zerg players often utilize hit and run tactics and harassment maneuvers. In this case, it's the Terran player doing all the harassing, so yeah. He actually is hitting both of my expansions, as you can see. I do have Mutalisks able to take out that Liberator there. The AI says Mutalisks can dart into the Terran player's base, deal damage to workers and structures, and retreat before Terran forces can respond effectively. And that, I mean, again, the reverse is happening here. I'm so busy defending my base against all these drops and attacks that my Mutalisks don't really have a chance to hit the enemy base at all. And yeah, the harassment tactics can be used to control key map locations, denying expansions, and slowing down the enemy economy. So my opponent is doing a pretty good job of that. You can see they have a lot more resources than me. I am still harvesting at a decent rate, though. Here, finally, the Mules are able to clean up those Marines and the medevacs, so those guys go down. Now, moving on to the late game, tech switches and key units. In the later stages of the match, the Zerg player might transition into more advanced unit compositions. Ultralisks, massive and heavily armored melee units, can be produced to act as the front line in engagement. So yeah, I really actually like going for Ultralisks, one of my favorite units. So before we get into that, though, let's take a look at this this drop over here. We got 2 full medevacs, and they're just dropping a bunch of Marines into my expansion here. And again, I don't have any defense. I'm way out of position. I do have a few combat units. They're just sitting in my main base. And then all these Mutalisks that was going into the enemy base to harass them, I flew them back and forgot about them, and they just got wiped out by these Marines. You can see they just didn't stand a chance. I only killed like 2 Marines there. So that was pretty bad. But then I did get kind of lucky here. I had all my units surround their medevacs. He doesn't get a chance to drop them, and then my Mutalisks are just able to fly through and take them down. And that was actually a pretty big comeback there, losing all those Marines and medevacs without a fight. But if you look at the top left, you can see the Terran player has done a lot more damage to me than I have to him. Anyway, what I like to do in terms of the late game, though, is I'll go for Mutalisks, and then what my opponent will typically do once they see those mutas is they will start building units to counter air. And then I'll do a tech switch straight to Ultralisks. And usually, if they're just building units to counter Mutalisks, they will not have the right composition to deal with Ultralisks. So that's sort of the strategy that I like to go with. I mean, certainly not the best one, but it's pretty fun when it works. As for other high-tech units for the Zerg, we've got Vipers, spellcasting units that are often used to disable or pull enemy units out of position. Now, Vipers would have been really good here, as you'll see later on. They have a devastating parasitic bomb that can deal massive area of effect damage to clumped up air units, which they don't have so much right now, but later on you'll see the Terran player just gets a bunch of medevacs, a bunch of Liberators. So Vipers would have been really good against those, but I kind of just forgot about them, so I didn't build any this game. We've also got Infestors that can be employed to cast powerful spells like Fungal Growth, which immobilizes enemy units. Now, it used to just freeze them in place, but now it just slows them for a few seconds. But it does deal a whole lot of damage, and you can see now I am flying around with my Mutalisks, and again, they are very mobile, so you can very easily just dart them in, dart them out, hit different areas to try to deny enemy expansions. So I was working on building my economy back up. I rebuilt my expansions and mining as quickly as possible. You can see the income. I do have greater income. I think my opponent, he sort of forgot about his command centers, his orbital command, so he wasn't really using the energy on them as efficiently as he could. But for Terrans, they are able to mine very quickly with those mules, so even if you sort of forget about it, you can really easily catch up by just dropping a bunch of mules at once. Now moving on, the AI talks about engagements and macro management. Engagements between Zerg and Terran armies involve complex micro and macro management. Micromanagement refers to the control and positioning of individual units during battles, such as using Zerglings to surround and overwhelm Terran units, which I never do because Zerglings, yeah, that takes some serious skill there. Like, I've seen pros do that, but in general, I think with a lower level, this is Gold League, yeah, I just do not have the micro skill to use Zerglings against Terran with any degree of effectiveness. We also got Mulisks that can snipe key targets. Again, Mulisks, not so great in big engagements, so I just mainly use them to harass the enemy. You can see they are building some missile turrets, though, that makes that a little more difficult. Macro management involves overseeing the production of units, constructing structures, and managing resources effectively. Good macro allows the Zerg player to maintain a steady stream of units and reinforcements, giving them an advantage in battle. So you can see a massive army here for the Terran player. They stopped harassing me, actually, which gave me a chance to focus on macro myself. You can see I have a whole lot of expansions, quite a bit of map control. My opponent is also expanding quite a bit, though, although he doesn't have many workers there yet. His army is moving out across the battlefield, so this is the first huge engagement here. Massive amount of Marines. We got Thors, Cyclones, Ghosts, but here come my Ultralisks. I do have Infestors, and you'll see here the fungal growths are just massive, just hitting half of his army, slowing him down, dealing massive AoE damage to those Marines. And yeah, the Ultralisks did a pretty good job, but they did all get cut down. I think I did a decent job with the units I had, but they also just wiped out most of my army, and here comes their forces. They still have plenty of attack power here. I very frantically start building a lot more Ultralisks, and I didn't actually realize this until this game, but apparently when Zerg eggs are destroyed, you just recover all of the resources. You just get all the resources back. I didn't realize that at the time, but that really helped because I did get a bunch of eggs destroyed here. Yeah, we got a massive army. They take out the natural. They're moving into the main base where all my tech structures are. So this is looking pretty serious for the Zerg. But then all of the Ultralisks just spawn at once. We got 3 there in the main base with more coming in from the natural. And they are just cutting these guys down. The Marines hardly do any damage to Ultras. The Thors are pretty decent, but you can see they just clean those guys up. He could have dropped all those units right into that expansion and done some serious damage, but he does just retreat. I think he suffered so many losses there that he was kind of afraid of a counterattack, so he retreated with all those guys back to the main base. For Terran, it is a lot harder to rebuild your army compared to Zerg. With Zerg, you got lots of larvae. You can just instantly build an army back. You can see I have 180 supply versus the Terran's 112. Now I'm moving across with my Mutalisks. Find an SCV building a command center there, so snipe that. And he does have enough forces, though, to deal with those Mutalisks. So I got Ultralisks running around on the opposite side. They go for this planetary fortress. SCVs, if you have enough of them, they can repair very quickly, but Ultras do quite a bit of damage, so they take that thing out without any difficulty. On the other side, I am hitting the other planetary expansion with all those Mutalisks, and so I'm starting to do what my opponent was doing in the early game, where I'm the one harassing him this time, using those Mutalisks to fly across the battlefield, hitting him from multiple angles, so it's very difficult for him to defend on both fronts. His army moves very slowly. You can see, though, the Terran player does have a huge stockpile of resources, almost 5,000 minerals, over 5,000 gas. But I have pretty good income as well. I do have a bunch of expansions. And my tech structures largely remain intact. He did actually kill I think, my infestor pits, so I didn't realize it until later, but I wasn't able to build infestors, which would have been really nice to have. So moving on, the AI talks about late game victory conditions. So the late game often involves critical battles and strategic maneuvers. Zerg players may aim to overpower the Terran players' defenses and destroy their production facilities. So I'm doing that here, kind of flying in with a massive swarm of mutalisks, taking out a few isolated missile turrets. The Terran army was on the other side of the field, and they are moving. They're moving in, and yeah, I probably could have done more damage if I was paying attention. But yeah, the mutalisks basically just destroyed a bunch of missile turrets and hardly anything else there. Not a whole lot of damage done. The Zerg player might also employ a swarm strategy, overwhelming the Terran player with a massive number of units, utilizing their ability to quickly rebuild the army through the larva mechanic. So yeah, I am maxed out right now, 200 supply, but the Terran army, you can see here, now has a massive amount of air units, medevacs, and liberators. So this is where the Vipers would have really come in handy to just annihilate those things. He is building a lot of stuff, and he has so many unspent resources. I am hitting this expansion, or attempting to, but those Ultralisks go down real fast. You can see the planetary fortress is getting repaired very quickly by those SCVs, so that doesn't work out. Hitting the other side with more Ultralisks, these guys come in. Again, the SCVs are coming in to repair, but yeah, the planetary fortress still goes down. Liberators take a while to deploy, so they aren't able to actually... they're not so great at defending, as you can see. They just weren't fast enough. And I snipe yet another command center over on the right side of the map. So, moving on, the AI starts talking about the Terran perspective. So, Terran defense and countering. As the Zerg player pushes into the late game, the Terran player will employ various defensive measures to withstand the Zerg onslaught. This may include building fortified positions with siege tanks and bunkers. You didn't see really any of those in this match. Utilizing the high power of Thors against areas. Now, yeah, Thors are quite good, but again, they are very slow, and you can just sort of avoid them, I think, with the Mutalisks. He does have the Liberators chasing them around. I think Mutalisks are slightly faster. Terran players might also incorporate the use of spellcasters such as Ghosts to employ tactical nuclear strikes or snipe key Zerg units. No nukes in this battle, but they did use Ghosts. The snipe is really good against Zerg. I think he was using that on my Ultralisks earlier, and those guys just, yeah, they died real fast. Base trading and map control. In some situations, Zerg players might choose to initiate a base trade scenario. So we do see this in a little bit, I think, once his army starts pushing out again. Instead of engaging his army, I go for the main base. I am hitting the expansion though here, taking out 2 more command centers under construction, and I think I do destroy this planetary fortress. Yeah, that thing goes down, so I am denying the resources. Mutas flying around unchecked, killing a bunch of SCVs. You can see I have over 10,000 minerals now, and I'm still nearly maxed out. I do engage here with the Ultralisks, but yeah, they're dealing a lot of damage to the Marines. The Marines are hardly doing anything, but the Ghosts, yeah, again with those sniping attacks, just take down the Ultras pretty quickly. So I lost quite a bit of units, but again, instantly able to rebuild everything. Back up to 200 army supply, and here comes the whole army though. Moving out from the top left side of the field, we've got the Liberators deploying, setting up a perimeter defense while the Marines destroy the expansion itself. I did burrow the drones, and he didn't actually notice. So this is the base trade that I was talking about earlier. I do send a massive swarm of Mutalisks to attack their main base as the Terran force heads towards mine. Meanwhile, I did rebuild my infestor pit, so I think I've got lurkers here actually now. Lurkers are really good against clumped up units. Although these ones aren't really that upgraded. He didn't actually realize I had the lurkers here, so they're just sitting there unnoticed, continuing to attack through these guys, and they do get quite a few kills there before he realizes it and uses the scanner sweep to take him down. But he's already down to 166 supply, and then here come a huge group of Ultralisks with infestors to back him up, and those poor Marines just don't stand a chance. So the Terran army is now pretty much dead, and we got Mutalisk in the main base, so that is the end of the game. GG. An exciting end to a very back and forth match. I was running very low on gas at the end, but over 10,000 minerals. My opponent, as you can see though, he still had so many unspent resources, but still, like, without the ability to rebuild his army quickly, that was really quite difficult, I think, for him, losing those forces in the engagements. He just didn't really have the right counter for mass Ultralisks. So yeah, didn't quite get through all of the ChatGPT's analysis there. But overall, the AI displayed a surprisingly accurate knowledge of the game. I think the only glaring mistake I saw in the AI's analysis was that it says Zerg players might utilize the massive Leviathans that can unleash devastating attacks. Yeah, the Leviathans cannot be used in multiplayer, so that's just false. They're only available in the campaign or custom matches. But otherwise, it described this Zerg vs. Terran match very accurately. Let me know if you'd like to see more of these in the future, but that's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.